Hello, everybody, and I'm sorry that we're late tonight. We're probably about 21 minutes late to be precise. My name is Kathryn Jean, and as you know, I've put out this broadcast tonight, and I've got with me Sandra Stewart, and she's a naturopath. We both studied together and finished our studies late last year. I think it was, Sandra, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Yep. And what we want to do tonight is we'd like to talk to everyone about Hashimotos. The reason why we're doing that is we're coming from basically both being sufferers of Hashimotos. Sandra's been a sufferer longer than me, and I was actually diagnosed whilst I was doing the course in the later part. And Sandra is someone who was there beforehand and also there very much for me afterwards. So some of the things I've noticed, Sandra, when I've actually got clients now coming to me and I seem to be attracting Hashimotos. I don't know if it's a magnet on me, but I'm just seem to be grabbing them. But they all come in with a lot of different symptoms. And what I'd like to ask you tonight is, what symptoms did you have, and how long do you think you actually suffered before you actually realised that you had Hashimotos?
You know, it's a really good question because I think we get used to feeling so bad in a way that we think that's the way life is. So it's hard to know how long it was going for. I think, though, typically Hashimoto seems to go in these sort of waves, you know. And so if I think right back to when I had those kind of periods where I just didn't want to get out of bed, like extreme fatigue or depression and anxiety, I think back to like 15. I was about 15. That said, I think as the years go by and the destruction of the thyroid continues with the autoimmune mechanisms at play, I think the symptoms tend to get worse and more pronounced. And I think as we get older and we have more responsibilities, it's more debilitating, or it's more obvious. So the symptoms that were really apparent to me was the anxiety. That's probably the biggest one, and the most debilitating, to the point where it was like panic attacks. And then I seemed to learn how to manage those. Or avoid situations where I know they would occur. But then it seemed to be just like an anxiety where I couldn't eat because I couldn't swallow properly, or you know, feeling dread, impending doom, that sort of thing. Depression seemed to be one, but more so when I was younger. And you learn coping mechanisms for them, like how to exercise and then sort of like ward off the depression. So they were probably the main two, with this anxiety and then depression. But more so the anxiety. I never seemed to suffer so much with the weight gain, but I know having times when I'd lose so much weight for no reason and then put it back on again and nothing had really changed. So, they were the main things for me.
Do you think if you lost some weight that maybe you went between being like Hashi and being Graves, do you think? Do you think that it could have been something that happened? And do you think that happens with people, that like it sort of steers you off the path, doesn't it? Where, like with me, I had weight gain, and as you say, like 15 years for you. When I think back, I suffered, as you know, agoraphobic anxieties in my 30s, and I look back now and I go, tick the box. I wonder if that was Hashi back then. And same with depression and, you know, a lot of the things you said. And I think that as we see, what happens is there's a lot of things going around. People, like, they'll grab on symptoms and sometimes they could be representing other things. But interesting you said then that one of the things you got with anxiety was that fear of swallowing and choking, may have been. I had exactly the same thing, you know, and now I know that would have been my thyroid that would have been playing around.
And then particularly when we're hypothyroid, that's a really common symptom now. And when we're hypothyroid, the thyroid, because we're not producing enough thyroid hormone, and you'll see it in some people with a goiter, you know, so the thyroid enlarges to try and produce more thyroid hormone. So that can also sort of encroach on the esophagus as well, which will give a feeling of not being able to swallow. But I don't know, I think it's something to do with the vagus nerve as well, that's where that symptom seems to come from. And I really, you know, someone put it in perspective for me the other day, things like paranoia and phobia. And they said, when your brain's not right, if your brain chemistry isn't right for some reason. So we know when you're hypothyroid, you're not getting that T3 to all your brain cells.
Yeah.
I think it almost just turns on the alarm, like everything's a danger, and we seem to like cling to certain things that might be dangerous to us because we can rationalize it. Yeah. But it seems to be like when we're hypothyroid, you will get fearful of things, which is rather irrational in a way as well. But just going back to what you said about swinging between hyper and hypo, there are some theories out there about that. It is possible to have Graves and Hashimoto's. There's two different types of antibodies and there's slightly different things happening. Yeah. But it's still causing this thyroid destruction with Hashimoto's. And Graves' disease, it's more to do with the thyroid receptors. So it kind of makes them hyperactive and therefore it's two different things, but you can have both. Whereas I don't have Graves' disease, but what does happen is when the thyroid is destroyed enough, you go through what's called a thyroid storm, where your thyroid leaks more hormone because the cells are being destroyed by that autoimmune mechanism, and so you're leaking T3 and T4 at a higher rate than usual. Yeah. So you go hyper for a temporary sort of amount of time. They say usually it lasts anywhere up to about 3 months, which in my experience it is about 3 months. Yeah. Yeah.
So when you're talking about because I just want to say that we've had a good morning from Florida, USA here, and that's from Leslie. So hello, Leslie. We've got Rachel also saying hello to us. So it's great to see them. I can see on my side here, which you won't, we've got quite a few people that are looking in on us. And I know that there's more people from the States that are clicking in even now. So it's morning there and evening here. But the thing is, what's interesting what you say about that, people who are listening in may not realise what T3 and T4 is and the antibodies. And I know that that's a great big subject within itself, and maybe we might even do this again and go through explaining to people exactly T3, T4, the tests that you asked for, which we've gone through and you've advised me on even, which is getting the reverse T3, your antibody counts. But also the stress and the cortisol and all that sort of thing's got a lot to do with it as well. But we may leave that for another time. We might just stick to this time about symptoms. Like I know I had a lot of hair falling out. And at the time I went to my hairdresser and said, why is this hair falling out? And they said, oh, that's it, doctor, that's nothing, that's whatever. And I didn't relate it, but once I knew that I was Hashim, I remember ringing me and saying, you okay? And I was like, yeah, I was, because I knew why. But I got the weight gain with mine, as you know, and it was really bad. But I've had clients come to me and they say they've got body aches. That's one thing. Did you have that?
Not that I know, and this is going back to the things that you get used to. So maybe I did at some point and just ignored it. I know I used to get really bad lower back, but no, it didn't seem to be that for me. And the symptoms vary quite a bit. So no, I never really got the aches that much. No.
Did you suffer?
And the hair falling out, absolutely did get that. Yeah.
So you wash your hair and you look at it and you go, oh my God, what's happening here?
Or the bathrooms. I moved into a place with white tiles on the floor. So it's just like, you could never see them before, and then, whose idea was white tiles? Because then you really see how much hair you're losing. Yeah.
But the thing is that when you lose that hair, you don't know you've got a thyroid problem. And that really puts a fear through you. People would jump into, have I got cancer? Have I got this? And, all these little things that add up when we're living life, we're not connecting all the little trains together with them. And like mine, as you know, happened through a hair dye I had put in, and I had a bad reaction. I ended up having to have blood tests, which found out what we found out. But how did you actually find out?
So I had taken a trip overseas, and I just knew something was wrong. I'd been to doctors after I had my son. He's now 6. I just knew something wasn't right. So I was getting this anxiety and then this depression, and I was thinking, is it postpartum, postnatal depression and things like that. And I was exercising, I was eating well. I just couldn't quite understand what was going on. And then what tends to happen with Hashimoto's, or when your thyroid is underactive for whatever reason, is that something else has to pick up the slack in the body, and that tends to be our adrenal glands, because life doesn't slow down for us. So we still have to keep performing, and so this is as well where a lot of the adrenal or HPA axis dysfunction, which is a whole other topic we can talk about. But that feeling of inability to deal with stress is a really common symptom of hyperthyroid. Hashimoto's, is that it's like it's almost like you're burning up sensation in your brain, So I was getting a lot of that, and I knew things weren't right, but no one could tell me what. Like the doctor saying you're a picture of health, and I had 3 doctors told me that, and everyone tested TSH, and I think the highest it got to was only about 7, and they weren't even alarmed at that, They were like, no, you're fine. And it's like I just knew, and I started to feel like I was going a bit crazy, like I was like, is this in my head? I feel like I'm about to fall off a cliff. It was that feeling. And how I found out, I was doing, as part of my studies, I was doing some work with a group of naturopaths, just helping them out. And they asked me to do a research project on Hashimoto's. And even then I didn't join the dots, I was like doing it thinking, this would be horrible to have, I'm doing this. I lost my sense of taste. I remember that, just thinking, do I have a zinc deficiency, iron? I couldn't taste properly. So I went to the doctor and I said, I want you to test me for zinc, iron, everything, Hashimoto's. And he's like, Hashimoto's? I'm like, just do it. Yeah, and the antibodies came back as over 2,000. So it was, I remember the response, and it's quite a big deal when you get diagnosed. For me, it was. It's a relief at the same time. It's like, oh my God, is this a life sentence? What does this mean? And my body's not working. And it's a big thing. I don't think people address the emotional side of Hashimoto's enough either. Like, it's all about numbers and labs, and it's like, but how do you feel?
I think you're right there, because I know when I was diagnosed, you did ring me and say, I'm worried, are you depressed and things like that. And I wasn't really that bad, because I'd gone through trying to lose weight, which people, if they look at my Facebook page, they'll see that video. And I tried to do that for my daughter's weddings. And even though at my first daughter's wedding, I downed a lot of fat blaster tablets and everything to get the weight down. And I did, well, a bit. But then by my next daughter's wedding, 4 months later, I chucked it all back on again. And when I was going through, when we were doing our course, and I was going through and I was making sure I'm ticking the boxes on what I'm eating, I'm doing it all right. I'm not drinking alcohol, I'm being a really good girl here. And yet I was gaining and gaining and gaining, and it was so upsetting. My brain fog was bad. I couldn't concentrate. Everything was just crashing. Like you said, my moods, I was getting so upset so easily. It was ridiculous. And I thought, what is going on with me? And so, and then, of course, what happened, because I wasn't losing weight, I was like, oh, bugger it, I'll just have a drink, So then I'd have a drink, and then it'd be one glass of wine, a few glasses of wine. But at the end of the day, when I found out, it was like, oh, my God, thank God there's a reason for this. Because then we could actually start working on it. And I think what happens is that you're right, people don't address that emotional thing, or the emotional thing they go through afterwards trying to address it. Like you told me you tried to do the API diet. And for anyone who doesn't know, the API diet is an autoimmune diet, isn't it, Sandra?
AIP, autoimmune protocol. Yeah.
Yeah, that one. And you hated that, didn't you?
It wasn't easy. I don't know. Yeah, look, I can't say I liked it. I don't want to be discouraging to anyone who's doing it, because it's still a lot of my diet is still sort of based on AIP. Like, I've added a lot more in since then. But I think just the diagnosis and going, where to from here? Am I ever going to feel better? And then doing this really strict diet. and you lose I lost sort of a lot of joy around everything. I thought I'll never be able to do anything again. I guess I felt a little bit disabled, or debilitated, like really restricted, and I don't feel like that now. Just for anyone listening, it's certainly not like that now.
Yeah.
But AIP, it's not for the faint-hearted, I don't think.
Yeah,
but it's doable.
Me off it.
It's doable, and I think a lot of people do it with really great results. It's quite a shock to the system, I think, in the beginning. And that's going from a fairly sort of paleo diet anyway. I can't really imagine going from sort of pizza and chips and soft drink to that. Like, that would be, night and day. But, I think certainly looking towards, for me anyway, a sort of paleo style diet works really well.
Yeah.
A lot of veggies and making sure you're getting your cofactors, like your other nutrients or minerals and vitamins you need for thyroid function is really important.
Yeah. I've had a question here, and someone's actually asked me, Ashley has, what is an AIP? So she's actually asking so can you quickly run through what that would be if you went AIP?
Yeah, I will, and just you stop me if I start waffling, okay?
Yeah,
so AIP stands for autoimmune paleo, and it's a protocol. So it's essentially cutting out. It's an elimination diet. You cut out a lot of food groups, and you go really back to basics. So the basics are really just vegetables, excluding nightshade vegetables, no legumes, no nuts, no seeds, no dairy, no gluten, no grains. So really what you're left with is a set of vegetables and coconut products and meat. So it's really, really basic. You do that for a set amount of time, and then you start adding things in one by one. So you add sort of egg yolk in first, and you see if you have a reaction. Now, there are limitations to this kind of diet, not just from what you can and can't eat, but there are limitations in not how effective it is, but how we can decipher whether we do have a reaction to a certain food or not. So the idea of it is to heal your gut while you get rid of all these foods that are potential having like irritants or allergens or that to your body, and then you add them back in and see if you're having a reaction to them. And then that's how you identify foods that are problematic to you. That's it in a nutshell.
That's a good summary, that one. I did look into doing that, and I know that when I was diagnosed, I was told, I think you could have said go paleo, don't do the AIP, but I did that gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, grain-free, and that's sort of that. And then, as you say, the nightshades, that's a group of vegetables. A lot of people don't even know what they are. That's another discussion we may have another time. And I'll put something up about that too, so people can read it and hook into it. But the thing is that it's the way of doing that change of food. It's also such a mental thing too, because we're so used to being able to go down and get McDonald's or get a takeaway or jump into the local Chinese or the Thai or whatever you fancy. But the problem is you can't, and the repercussions aren't good. So I'm a real foodie person, and I love my food. I love cooking food. I love cooking for big things, and with my kids of 5, I have heaps going on. So I mean, that's a big deal to me. And when I had to cut it all off, it was, oh my God, what have I got to do? But you have to reset your brain. So we're coming back again to what you said about looking after the emotional side of Hashimoto's, whereas, as you say, they do the labs and do that, and that's what they get on with. One of the things I wanted to say or speak about tonight is that being diagnosed with Hashimoto's or the thyroid condition, when your first blood test comes back, it can usually have the TSH, which the doctors judge by as being normal. Is that correct?
Yeah. In fact, I have a couple of patients now with normal TSH, really high antibodies. So that means the body's really attacking the thyroid, the immune system. And the product of the thyroid, the things that it puts out into the body, it should be doing at these certain levels. Their levels are really, really low. So the TSH is just what's stimulating the thyroid. It's not a great indicator. It's not always the greatest indicator of what's happening in the thyroid, and particularly when we start looking at a bigger picture and moving to the other glands, the pituitary, the hypothalamus, all these other signaling glands, we've got to make sure they're working correctly too. So there's a bigger picture involved. I don't want to overwhelm anyone.
No.
But TSH, it's just too limited, you know.
Well, the thing is, the body's all integrated. It all sort of is working so much in cog with each other. And I mean, one of the things I got out of the course was it sort of really opened my mind to how miraculously we actually do function as a body, as you know, all the cells and blah 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 blah. But what you said then about the gut and making sure that AIP diet, that it gets the actual gut cleared out so that it has time to repair. And that I find comes back to a lot of our common diseases we have anyway, is that our bad gut flora. And that's very important. I think that people, when they think of thyroid, they go there and they're not thinking about their gut. And so they don't have, and I think, and I don't know if you agree with me here, Sandra, but not enough people explain the whole thing of why they need to do this and what the repercussions are, not just, well, you've got to go gluten-free, that's it. You know, I think people need to know, to understand there's a reason, but also there is a life in Hashimoto's.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's several things that are happening in the gut with which we know now with autoimmune disease. And one of the biggest ones is intestinal permeability. So that's what's commonly known as leaky gut.
Yep.
Where basically proteins can pass through the very thin wall of the gut. Yep. And once they get through that wall, your body will sort of invoke this immune response against these proteins that shouldn't be there. They should be, in your guts, going from one end to the other, and we sort of selectively pull out what we need. But when you've got this, the integrity of the gut wall has been compromised, things are escaping and getting through, and this tends to invoke this immune response, and it only seems to exacerbate any autoimmune disease that we have already. And there's also something called molecular mimicry, whereas certain proteins that do get through, particularly gliadin, that's the protein found in gluten.
Yep.
It's very similar to that of the thyroid, the cells of the thyroid. So your body's kind of getting confused and attacking both. So, and I mean, there's so many other things. You've got T-reg cells, So these are your kind of firefighters of the immune system.
Yeah.
They're trying to regulate any over-immune response or hyperimmune response. And they're all in the gut wall as well. So if we don't have the right microflora and we don't have things, as they should be, that they're not working either. So there's just so many layers of how the gut is involved in all health, but particularly in autoimmune disease as well. And is there life with Hashimoto's? Absolutely. I think I never felt better than before I had Hashimoto, or before I knew.
Yeah. It's funny, one of the questions that was asked to me when I went to the doctor regarding this, and they asked me, when was the last time you felt well? And I actually just sat there and stared at her, and she said, well, when? And I said, well, I actually can't remember. Do you think that when you had that, when you actually tried to think, when was the last time I really felt well?
Yeah, it is funny. You do this kind of retrospective on your life, don't you? And you think, when did this start? When the doctor told me, I think I responded with a 4-letter word starting with F, and then just sort of went. The day the Twin Towers collapsed, and you remember exactly where you were and what you were doing when they told you about it. It was like that. I still remember what I was wearing, where I was sitting when the doctor told me. But I'm sorry, I've just lost my train of thought. I've gone off
No,
track.
no.
I'm thinking about the Twin Towers.
Yeah, no, well, hey, that was something that was very traumatic too. But the thing is also, like, I know we won't go into it tonight, but I just want to talk about maybe the linking of autoimmune diseases back to the MTHFR and that gene mutation. Or, you know, what we might have a talk about that later about things. Okay, so someone, Leslie from the States here has written, I do feel better when I have kimchi or I drink kombucha. I have no idea it was assisting my hypothyroid.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because they're feeding things like kimchi, and not only are they partially digested, so they're very easy on your stomach because of that fermentation process that's already happened in the food, but they're feeding you good bacteria. So absolutely. Yeah, it's really, really good.
And the thing is, it's good because people are getting to ask questions tonight, and they're getting to realise, like this question here, and fermentation of food. And this is another lot of foods that opens up a door where, you know, it's if it was used to be a special thing for you, we'll pile it into the diet. It's good to have, you know. And I think that and the main thing of keeping your gut, and why you probably do this too, that's one of the major things that we look at as a naturopath is, you know, what's happening with your gut and getting that integrity in your gut back again.
Yeah. Things like infections, I'm finding that seems to be really common now. Parasites, even things like pinworm.
Yeah.
Like I found that to be really common in people with Hashimoto, like pinworm. You know, you get tired, you get really tired, you get like I can't move tired. Pinworm, things like that. Parasites is a big one. Intestinal permeability is another one. There's tests that can be run for all of these things.
Yeah.
I like to do something called CDSA, which is a comprehensive digestive stool analysis. So it looks at the microflora composition. It really gives us a good sorry, I've got a bit of a cold at the moment.
You're right.
Gives us visibility into what's really going on inside the gut. So it's one of the first things I'll look at. And it seems to be with every patient now, regardless or irrespective of their condition. We look and we usually find something there. Helicobacter pylori is another one. It seems to be implicated in things like Hashimoto's too. Yeah.
And I think that the thing, like we're saying with the blood tests that your doctors perform, that a lot of doctors would, I'm sure it actually costs if you get your thyroid, your T3, T4, all that tested, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think there's one test that's free, but after that it costs. This is in Australia for everyone in the States and the UK. But what the trouble with I have with clients is they go, well, my doctor says my TSH is okay, so that's it. But there's tests that we can do anyway that can get that. I mean, have you used that saliva test they do?
I've used saliva for things like adrenal hormones and sex hormones. I like the saliva. It depends what I'm testing for. I've never tested saliva with Hashimoto's because it seems that the thyroid hormones, I don't know how stable they are in our saliva. So I generally would go blood spot or blood draw. So that's like taking a vial of blood, or a blood spot is like quite a lot of blood you've got to prick from your finger. TSH generally will be free. I think in the States you have to pay because I think it's more a slightly different model. You need your insurance and things. In Australia, TSH and your doctor will do TSH, maybe T3 and T4. And antibodies for free, covered by Medicare. But usually you have to ask, like you have to say, I really want this. Some doctors will do it, some doctors won't. And for good reason, they get audited by Medicare. And if they're ordering tests which they cannot justify, then, you know, they're in trouble. So the reverse T3 you have to pay for. So reverse T3 is I think it's about $80 from memory.
In Australia,
to pay for that. Yeah. And to run a full thyroid panel privately, it's about $175.
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered quite a bit today, and we've had quite a few questions, and as I said, from America and some from the UK, which is great. And I'm pleased that everyone was able to get online and, you know, listen to it. And I hope it's been helpful, because one thing I know I'd like to do is to probably take away the cloud around Hashimoto's or really around thyroid. And what I'd love to do is to be able to get it that we could get tested without doctors having this blank screen at the TSH, because I know I would have been tested earlier. I would have found my issues before it got as bad. You would have found it, and it would stop a lot of us from going down pathways of depression and, you know, awful mood swings and, you know, heaven forbid anyone who's been suicidal with it. So, you know, maybe if we get more awareness and more likings to these videos and things, it may help to have a bit of a push in that direction. So
yeah, and I think awareness is really key here, because I don't know, with the exception of some doctors, and definitely a lot of integrative medical doctors know about this, and they do full test panels, which is great.
Yeah.
But I think in the you know, this orthodox medicine, your general practitioner, they'll test TSH and then they'll treat according to that. And they don't even bother with antibodies because they don't treat that any differently.
Yeah.
So they're like, why would we run another test?
Yeah.
Which may, you know, we might get a admonitory letter from Medicare saying you're running too many tests when they're going to treat exactly the same way. So it's I think with Hashimoto's, the biggest thing is taking the power into your own hands, working with a good practitioner. It's important, but and that can be quite scary. You know, it can be quite scary going, well, no one else is going to do this for me. I've got to do it. And it does take working. I think working with a good practitioner who will listen to you and understand it really helps as well. Like so finding a good practitioner and then taking control back and demanding the tests you want, you know, and not stopping until you get them. Yeah. And it's hard when you feel weakened and beaten down by this disease. It's very, very hard.
Yeah.
But, you know, certainly once you can correct that hormone level and then start working with the rest of the body, because the thyroid's the victim, you know, like you said, we focus on it so much, but it's actually just the one getting destroyed. It's what's going on in the body to you know. Anyway,
Well, no, but I mean that's true, and the thing is that it's like you know what you said then about it getting hammered and everything like that, and people having choices. I mean, I've had clients come in to me, and one of them came in with an earache, and he said, oh, the doctor said I've got to wait to see a referral to a specialist. And he said, but, you know, I don't know what to do, and what am I going to do for a month and a half? And I said, well, if you were going to get something done around your house, would you get a few quotes? And he said, oh, yeah, of course you would. I said, well, why don't you do that on your body? And I think people forget to give that same luxury to their own self, to not even, if you go to a conventional medical doctor, that's fine. But you have got natural doctors now. And I mean, I'm not saying that because you and I are. I'm saying it because it gives people choice and it stops them being limited. It stops their knowledge being limited. So the opening up and having more possibilities. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about good information, not information coming from hearsay, this, because we don't want anyone out there getting the wrong stuff or starting to take things that could have an adverse effect too. So I think all that's really important. But, yeah, so, look, thanks a lot, Sandra, for doing this with me tonight. I hope it was a bit of computer glitch to begin with. So we both had a learning here. But I'm really pleased that you got online. We're able to talk tonight. I hope that everyone else that was listening really liked it too. And, maybe we might do it again. We'll have a talk and see if we're both prepared to brave it again. And
that was great.
Put it out there.
Yeah, I'd love to.
And Sandra's in Bondi, New South Wales, and our mate in Western Sydney in the Hawkesbury Nepean area. So, anyone, thank you very much. And we'll say good night, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, world. Okay? Thank you. Bye.
Bye.